just going to be a great conversation today. So the structure of our event will be discussion-based, and Sarah will first begin with a presentation that she's curated for us to visually take us through her career journey. From there, Lillian Murphy, VP of D&I, will be discussing everything we've learned so far and asking a couple questions. And finally, towards the end, you guys will be able to ask a couple questions. So anything you guys want. So without further ado, I will let Sarah take over from here.
Thank you for that great intro. As she just said, my name is Sarah Levesque, and I am currently the Senior Sustainability Analyst for Americold, which I'll talk a little bit more about that company because chances are nobody has ever heard of it. My last position was at Compass Group, which again, probably most people haven't heard of it, but I can guarantee all of you are affected by Compass Group at DePaul. So let me just pull up and share my screen, and we'll get started. So this is my career path. So I started at DePaul in 2014, long time ago, as an undergraduate where I got my degree in environmental studies and then a minor in economics and a certificate in GIS. And then I did the 4+1 program with the MSSM program. I got my master's in sustainable management and I graduated with that in 2018. During that time, I also studied abroad with Dr. Klimas in Peru for a first year study abroad. I also did a study abroad in Belgium, where I actually got to work at the European Parliament. I also did research, so I had published research from 2 different areas, one for GIS and then one for LCA, which was my undergraduate project. I also interned at Urban Rivers, which is a local nonprofit in Chicago during my graduate time. And then I also volunteered at the Field Museum until very, very recently, whenever I just moved to Atlanta. I started doing that in grad school, and that as well helped me quite a bit in my career. And then I was also the Senator for Sustainability as an undergraduate, as a sophomore in SGA. So all of those things, if you have any questions about any of those experiences, please feel free to ask me later. After I graduated, basically a month later, I got a job at Compass Group. Compass Group is the 5th largest employer in the world, and it is the largest food service company in the world. So they actually do all of the food service for DePaul University. I got the very first position that was ever created for sustainability at Northwestern. We had just taken over the account at Northwestern, and I was brought in to be the sustainability expert. They hadn't had this role before. And so they didn't really know what they were looking for and had no idea what sustainability really was. They just knew that the university wanted it. So I got to come into a completely blank slate, create an entire program that within 1 year went national. And now there are several other sustainability managers, several of whom actually graduated with me at the same time, who are at other universities around the country. And then after 2 years, I was able to take that and turn it into a completely new role and actually briefly oversaw all of the sustainability programming for the Chicago accounts with Chartwells and Compass Group. So that oversaw Northwestern, U Chicago, DePaul, IIT, UIC, and I think I'm probably forgetting one in there. Almost every single school in Chicago except for Loyola and Columbia. So I got to oversee all their sustainability programming within the food system and food service. And then in this past November, I was thrilled to accept a new role as the Global Senior Analyst at Americold. Americold is still within the food system. They just do all of the refrigeration. So we'll talk about that in a second. They are the largest publicly traded refrigeration REIT. And for those of you who don't know, REITs are real estate investment groups, trusts. So they are their own sort of industry. But within that, Americold is very unique because it's strictly refrigeration warehousing. So imagine like an Amazon warehouse that's at -20 degrees all day, every day. Just constantly kept at -20 degrees, even in like Texas, California, Latin America, Australia, you know, all over the country, Europe, Asia Pacific, globally. We're really taking these massive facilities and just keeping all the food safe and ensuring it doesn't go to waste. So about 25% of all food in the US actually goes through an Americold facility. So it's one of those companies that has a very large footprint. It's an incredibly large energy consumer, but it's also an unavoidable energy consumption because we need to make sure that this food is not going bad. We need to make sure that this food is getting through the supply chain and getting to people who can consume it. And we're not wasting any of it. So one of the things that I really focus on is how can we reduce that energy consumption? We need to shift as much energy as physically possible over to renewable resources. How do we do that? How do we get the business case to work out for that? And what is it going to take over the next few years, since we are publicly traded and we are expected to report on all of these things? How to report on all of those metrics? So currently you can see we do an annual ESG report, currently working on that. And then we also report out to these different reporting organizations. Currently, that is always under review in this field. And then my last few slides are really talking about what I predict the future of sustainability will be. This is kind of an interesting one, so again, feel free to ask any questions on this slide, but I personally am predicting that there will be a divide between reporting and management. I think we are really heading towards a very big difference between doing all those CDP, TCFD, GRI, GRESB reporting, and then actually managing the programs. Similar to how in finance, you have people who work specifically in finance and they manage the numbers, then you have accounting who's really looking at reporting and making sure that that data is accurate. And those numbers are as accurate as possible. There's going to be a lot more government regulation and oversight. Europe is way ahead of us on this. They just released their EU taxonomy, which actually requires companies of a certain size to report based off of these numbers. And the SEC has created a task force for actually looking at getting ESG data incorporated into annual reporting with like 10K and the 10Q, et cetera. So there's going to be a lot more oversight. The data is going to be required. I don't think that any business will be able to ignore ESG in the future. This is going to be something that every single business is going to have to look at, especially if they're publicly traded. Carbon accounting and LCA, that is going to be standard. I hope y'all are learning it right now because those are skills. I did LCA as my undergraduate project and I'm soon to be published again in LCA, and it has been extremely useful in my career, even though my research has nothing to do with my day-to-day job. Having that background and having the knowledge of how to do that work has been very, very valuable in my day-to-day job. And then this one is a good transition to the next slide. Sustainability professionals, we're in crazy demand right now. It's absolutely exploded during the pandemic in the best possible way. And it's really looking very good. So here's some information. GreenBiz just released as of Monday their State of Green Business report. I recommend if you're interested in sustainability, you should read this report. It comes out every year. This shows, where the jobs are at. So this is a really good tool for anybody who's looking at, do I want to get into environmental scientist, or do I want to be an environmental manager, sustainability manager, where you can really look at that industry and what, how common those jobs are. And then also, I do want to draw your attention to the salary range. Whenever I started back in 2018, first out of the job market, the average salary was about 70K. Within the past few years, it's already jumped up to 95, and I really expect that to increase quite a bit more, especially since sustainability on LinkedIn, according to their reports, less than 1% of people on LinkedIn have sustainability in their job roles, but the amount of jobs that are looking for sustainability have increased exponentially. I can personally tell you that I got this job through people reaching out to me. This most recent job, I was recruited for it based off of my LinkedIn profile, and that's becoming more and more common. So it is a really, really good time to be in this area. I'm fairly young, very new in my career, and I'm having regular meetings with the C-suite, and I am the expert in the room at a company. And that's only because this is such a new field, and I have the educational background and experience to be able to back up what I'm saying. So yeah, that's kind of my presentation. I know I went through that pretty quickly. So if there's anything, if you have any questions about any specific area, I've got quite a bit to share.
Sounds good. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I forgot. We do have an intern position opening up soon. So it'll be a virtual part-time internship. So if you are interested, please reach out with the current resume. We're going to be posting that very soon. So job opportunity.
Thank you for that. I know a lot of people are going to be excited to figure out what intern position that's going to be. So thank you so much for all of that. It was a pleasure learning about your experiences, education, and now job. Now we're going to kind of go into the Q&A, but first I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and then I'll let all of the other members and students ask as many questions as they want. So to start, we were wondering what sparked your interest in environmental studies and what led you to get the master's in sustainable management?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Dallas, Texas, which is not an area at the time that you would have expected somebody to come out of that was very passionate about sustainability. But as long as I can always remember, I was kind of getting into arguments with adults and other students and other kids and just being like, yes, climate change is real. I mean, how many of you, well, probably this audience, a lot of people were, but I was in, second or third grade and arguing with my friends' parents about whether or not they should be getting solar panels on their roof. So it's something that I've just kind of been very, very passionate about for a long time, but I didn't realize it was a career path until actually I was probably a junior in high school and looking up colleges, and I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I was looking into engineering and then realized, wait a second, I can actually do this as a career path. And at that point, it wasn't long ago, but at that point everybody wrote it off as one of those things where you're never going to make any money, there's no career path, and I'm very happy to have proven them wrong.
Very nice. I loved that answer. I really appreciated that because it was kind of similar for me. Very awesome. So now kind of going into your professional roles, we were wondering what a day in the life of a senior analyst for ESG and energy at Americold Real is like.
For both roles, and I'll speak a little bit about the Compass role too, just because I had that role longer. For both of them, I've never had the same day twice. It is very consistent, and every other sustainability professional I've ever talked to it's constantly moving around. You're on your toes. You are jumping between every single area of the business every single day. My last role, I would go from doing a waste audit to planting hydroponics to creating, multi-million-dollar budgets to teaching students what needed to happen for them to be vegan, like meal planning and things like that. In this current role, I'm currently jumping between legal, and I need to get answers and responses for reporting. I'm going to finance to figure out what is our ROI requirements for solar projects. I'm going to capital planning to figure out, where is the next solar project that we need to put in. And then I'm turning to energy and saying, what are some more ways that we can reduce energy? What trainings can we create? And then, every single day is completely different. And that's one of the fun things about the role.
Very nice. Thank you. So the next question is, what are some trends in sustainability in business right now?
There's a lot of focus right now on reporting. Reporting is currently in the hot seat because everybody's kind of realizing it's not actually what, it's really great and it's still very much in the beginning, but its current format is completely unsustainable. There is probably like 30 or 40 metrics out there that you can align against, and they are all completely different. They don't line up with each other, and it's very, very difficult to actually figure out who really is ahead in the game, because you can kind of mess with those numbers because there's no regulation, there's no standard, and so a lot of them in the best possible way are coming together and saying we need to come up with something. So even just today there's a new task force with TCFD, CDP, GRI, and I think maybe GRESB also. They came together and they said by 2023 we're going to be completely aligned, so there's not going to be all of these other ESG metrics. It's going to be one. The ISSB, International Sustainability Standards Board, that was a directive from COP26. They're supposed to also have an international sustainability standard done 2023, 2024. So the current frameworks are undergoing massive change. And so that's definitely going to be a very, very big topic in the next few years as to how that's going to change. Carbon accounting is coming in big, and a lot of just trying to find out what the government is going to do. Any government, really. It's not just the US government, international as well. What are they going to do with reporting standards?
Yeah, and kind of with this question, has the pandemic influenced any or affected it in any different way? Has it been smoother, harder? Has the process been more challenging because of the pandemic, basically?
The pandemic actually, I think, is really what catalyzed a lot of these changes with sustainability. So I don't know if this is a great thing to research if you're not aware of it, but during the pandemic, there was that shock in the market where the market just crashed overnight. Everybody was really, really worried about it. Well, if you look at the data, the companies that had the highest ESG ratings not only had the least amount of shock, but they also recovered the fastest. And that hit the market and it just took off. That information kind of took off among investors, and they really realized exactly what we've been saying for a long time, is that ESG is an indicator of risk. The higher your ESG score, the lower the risk you have, and the more insulated you are from all these other things. So that the pandemic actually really has exploded sustainability. It's brought it to a whole nother level. I was at Compass Group at the time whenever the first pandemic hit, and I was laid off for 3 months, and I was one of the few who were brought back because sustainability was one of the things that the clients even determined, like, we have to have this. You can't go without it anymore. And I am very happy to say that they were right. I was able to prove them right. And then a lot of the other sustainability professionals during that time, most of them weren't actually even laid off. They kept their jobs. They weren't furloughed or anything, which is very, very indicative of the importance that companies are now placing on ESG.
So since all of this the industry is always changing and new things are being implemented, how do you stay up to date with all of the changing things going on?
Newsletters. I think I probably signed up for about 20 different newsletters, and I make a point to read them every day. Newsletters and conferences, this is an area that you can never stop learning. Absolutely never. I got my GRI professional certificate for reporting. That was done independently. So even if your company won't necessarily pay for it, you still really need to do this because it'll open up more areas. Having the GRI reporting, that helped open me up for new roles, and new ways to do things, because I wasn't previously doing GRI reporting. So you have to constantly keep learning, read those newsletters, go to conferences. You really cannot let up on it.
Sounds good. I will definitely look at those newsletters going forward. And kind of shifting gears, what are some issues within the food service that you seek to reform and make more sustainable?
Yeah, so in my last role, that was a constant thing that I was trying to push. So in Chicago, there's actually really amazing, for those of you who might be interested in food systems, there's really, really amazing community that's actually trying to work on creating an equitable food system in Chicago specifically, because in the Midwest, you're kind of in the middle of everything, and there's so much opportunity, and we have so many institutions that are purchasing such large amounts of food. CIFPAC Chicago, I always forget what the acronym stands for. Chicago Food Policy Action Council. I'd highly recommend looking them up. They're an excellent organization, and they're really trying to figure out, how do we get more BIPOC farmers? How do we get more equitable distribution of food? And Americold, it's a little bit different because it is directly separated. So at Compass Group, I was doing all the local, hyper-local purchasing, tracking, meeting the farmers, literally going out to the farmers' fields and, picking picking out what I wanted for the local market that week, and it was wonderful, and I loved it. And I've got the hookup for any good produce if you ever want some good produce, good sausages, etc. But in my current role, it's a little bit more disconnected because we don't actually own any of the food that comes through any of our refrigeration storage units. You know, we don't sell, our product is not food, our product is storage and space. And so, you know, you can't really say that, you know, we can't really determine who we're going to store food of necessarily. There's a contract process, they need to pay for the storage. And we don't necessarily see, you know, we might work with Cisco, but we don't necessarily work with their farmers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. And another question that I had, and I think a lot of other people are going to be interested in this, what are some misconceptions about sustainability that you find prevalent in today's society?
Yeah, oh, there are so many. Most people just don't understand what sustainability actually is about. Most people still think it's a nice to have, not a need to have, and that, you know, businesses, it's something that they still do to feel good. No, businesses' credit ratings are now tied to ESG scores. Your investors are looking at your ESG scores. It's definitely not a nice to have, it is a must have. If you don't have it and you're a large publicly traded company, you know, you need to be concerned. I think the other thing is people don't understand how to interpret data. So for example, a lot of people, MSCI, one of the ratings, that's one of the most commonly used. Most people interpret it as, oh, if a company's got a good score, they must be really good for the environment. But MSCI doesn't actually look at how a business impacts the environment. It's actually looking at how the environment impacts a business. So a good example is like McDonald's. MSCI, they don't report out their carbon emissions because for them, they claim that it doesn't affect them. You know, and MSCI accepts that because like climate change won't directly affect their supply chain. It might affect like where the beef comes from, but there will be beef for McDonald's to buy, so therefore McDonald's will be insulated from that. Where other companies, you know, aren't quite the same. So MSCI, a lot of people get that one very confused and they tend to think higher score on that, therefore better for the environment, but it's not exactly what that means. And it's very difficult to communicate that to a large population. Sometimes you just end up with, well, our numbers are improving and that's a good thing.
Sounds great. Thank you for that. And the last question that I want to ask, how do I phrase this? What is the most rewarding thing you've gotten out of your job or your jobs, your experiences in general?
Well, I have to say, since I've only been at Americold for a few months, there's been a lot of rewarding things, but they've been more smaller victories with the CEO and things like that. With my last role, one of the things I was most proud of is I actually during the middle of the pandemic, whenever I came back, we went fully reusable. Northwestern was the only major large school to go 100% reusable even at the very beginning of the pandemic. There wasn't a period where we said we're going to go to styrofoam or anything like that. We said we're going to go 100% reusable. I was able to write the case study, and that got a lot of attention internationally, and a lot of other colleges then followed suit very quickly to say that they were going to continue these programs. So that's something I was definitely proud of. I was also very proud of the amount of produce that we were able to get from local and hyperlocal farmers. You know, that is something that stood out about that program as an urban school. And also the fact that we were able to compost 3.6 tons with less than 0.001% contamination, you know, that's pretty awesome stuff.
Thank you so much. So now everybody, feel free to ask any questions that you have starting now. So you can just unmute your mic and ask away, and we'll go from there.
Hi, Sarah. My name is Gavin. I'm a third-year environmental science student. And I have a question because I recall that when you were first introducing yourself, you mentioned that you pursued a certificate with GIS. So I was just wondering, like, what are some of the other, I guess, like technical skills and qualifications that you've continued to get as you were furthering your career?
Yeah, definitely. Also, I think you're at the library right now, where I also worked for 4 years, so that's awesome to see. Still there. So I did my GIS certificate. I did my research and life cycle analysis, and so that was kind of really where I focused my technical side during my time, was really looking at the GIS, the statistical modeling and things like that. And so unfortunately with both of these roles, that's one of the areas where it hasn't been as useful. I've tried my best to like incorporate GIS because I honestly love the study, but I also got my GRI certificate, which is not quite as technical, but it is something that's very useful for reporting. Also working on my lead AP certificate, and that, for those of you who are interested, that is the #1 most requested certificate in business on LinkedIn for sustainability in business. And you get a great discount. You can get the book for free from the DePaul library, and you get a great discount as a student as well. So it's a great time if you are interested in looking at green buildings LEED certification. So that is LEED certification, LEED. Yep.
Thank you.
And again, anyone feel free to unmute your mic and ask those questions.
So did you have any internships, or how did you get the experience you needed for your career?
I had a few internships. So I never went to discount real life experience. So I was a waitress first off. That was my very first job, and that provided me with a lot of real world experience that I still use to this day. Understanding how to talk to people, even whenever in sort of that service position, is a wonderful way to just gain real life experience. And then I worked at the DePaul library as a circulation assistant, so I scanned books in and out. And again, that was really great for learning how to deal with people, research, and understanding data systems. And then I did my internship at the European Parliament, which was one of the highlights, honestly, to this day of my college experience. Not necessarily because I was in Europe and it was like a bunch of fun traveling around, and yeah, that was great. But the job, I was so lucky because I got to work for a wonderful MEP member of Parliament, Benedict Javor of Hungary, who was a member of the Greens Party, and it was a very small office. Hungary is not known for being very liberal, if you're familiar with international politics. And so, you know, the policy was you went to a protest every week. That was a requirement of working in the office, and getting to go to all these international conferences, writing speeches, and meeting people who, honestly, I was amazed that I was meeting. I got yelled at by Nigel Farage at one point, so I was very, very lucky to have those experiences so early on and learn from people who were ready to mentor me from day one. And that's kind of what I would recommend, is if you get a chance to ever choose your internship, find one where the person interviewing you talks about mentorship, because that's where you're going to get the most value from. Not necessarily from the day-to-day or the larger project, it's really going to be from the mentorship and what you can learn from that person. I also did a research internship at Urban Rivers, and so that's a local nonprofit in Chicago where they actually plant native prairie plants in the Chicago River to try and clean up the river. And that one was definitely valuable because it was the first time I was really leading the research on my own as a graduate student. Yeah, and that was just a short-term one. And I think those internships plus the additional experiences, the volunteer experience I mentioned at the Field Museum, that was insanely useful. It allowed me to gain, because basically for 12 hours a month, I was doing presentation skills, and I was delivering communication skills and science skills and honing it in on like 2-year-olds, which is they are the hardest audience possible. So I will say that that was really, really wonderful that I got to have that experience. And then, Yeah, so even though they weren't traditional internships, some of the volunteering or the Senator for Sustainability, I really got some wonderful experience. And I will say, you know, I've interviewed for roles in the past. I've interviewed people for roles in the past. And one of the first things I always look for, especially for people coming out of college, is do they have experience outside of their university life? So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have like a fancy internship at like Deloitte or something like that. It means, do you know how to understand, like, do you know how to talk to people who don't know about sustainability? Do you understand how it actually takes to get an ESG project done? Because, you know, you can come in and say, we want to get composting, public facing composting, but what actually goes into that? Well, you have to buy the bins, you have to create the signs, you have to create the communication, you have to create the training, you have to cost out how much labor that's going to be. You know, these are things that come from actually having these real world experiences. And you can gain that whether you're a waitress or whether you're doing a fancy internship. But that's something that you should definitely be trying to develop, is how do you gain those insights that can only be done through working.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, Sarah. It was amazing to see how your career, to hear about your career growth. One thing got me interested when you spoke about hydroponics. How is the application of it in USA? So I'm from India. I don't have lots of experience in the United States and with regards to agriculture. So I have been working with hydroponics back in India. So I was interested. I'm interested to know how it is in the United States. How have you seen the growth of hydroponics with regards opposed to the traditional agriculture? And do you have any data that says the water is being saved, or the hydroponics here needs less insecticides or pesticides? So is it in a way better than traditional agriculture?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So in America, there's kind of two different ways that hydroponics are coming in. So you've got the massive systems, and those tend to be with startups who are getting massive, I mean massive, billions upon billions of dollars of funding. You know, if you look at the startups, they are just huge because they're going for the tech side. So everything's automated, everything, they're in these giant warehouses, they've got the robots, and they're, you know, 10 stories tall, and there's no humans in there at all. So that's kind of the one side, and there's a lot of facilities that are doing that. There's one not too far, I think it's about 500 miles from Chicago, that they're doing lettuce, and they're the only lettuce in the US that is rated safe to eat, which is really impressive because lettuce is almost impossible, where you have to wash it, you have to clean it, you have to radiate it, you have to treat it somehow in order to assure that it will not cause foodborne illness. Like salmonella, but this facility is able to do it because there's literally no humans. Their water is clean, like clean probably 50 times. I think it's radiated. Like it's amazing what they're able to do. But then you have that sort of smaller group of hydroponics, and they are startups. So there's a really great one if you're interested in looking. Garfield Produce in East Garfield Park. They're absolutely amazing. They're like hyper local in Chicago. Their business is focused on creating jobs for the community in East Garfield Park, specifically for returning citizens. And they do that through hydroponic training. And then if you also look, there's a ton of hydroponic systems in Chicago. Windy City Harvest actually does training on how to do that. They have a 40,000 gallon hydroponic and aquaponic system, which is like amazing, and I highly recommend everybody go check it out at the farm in Ogden. So they're really cool. So that's kind of the two different areas, is you've got like these very, very small, like very small little farms. You've got these massive tech startups that are looking at it. And as far as the data, there absolutely is proof to show that it uses significantly less water. It uses significantly, obviously, less labor, because for these startups, there's pretty much nobody in there. And then even if you look at sort of the greenhouses. So Mighty Vine Tomatoes in Rochelle, Illinois, so they're very local. They grow tomatoes year round, literally picked right off the vine. You can find them in Costco, and Whole Foods, and I think Target as well. And they literally pick the tomatoes the day before they ship it. So in Chicago, you've got some really amazing tomatoes. They're grown in a greenhouse, and they use only about 10% of the water that it normally takes to grow tomatoes. And they're not even hydroponic, they're just in a greenhouse. And they're able to do this year round. And they all recycle all of the water as well. So there's a lot of new technology coming in farming that will change the scene quite a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because not only it conserves water, but then also it does not require insecticides or pesticides, and thereby it can be sold as organic. Those come out as organic products.
In the US, actually our regulations don't allow it to count as organic. It's kind of weird because they count, so for hydroponics, you have to put in the chemicals, the chemical fertilizer into the water. And so because of that, even though it's literally just potassium and NPK, nitrogen, and phosphorus, so they're exactly what's found in the soil, they're just a liquid version. Technically in the US, they do not qualify as organic. So that's why you won't see any hydroponic produce labeled as organic in the US, but that's like very much a point for discussion within food systems.
That's really interesting, and I never thought about it. I mean, it's just the constituents which you would find in soil that has to be put in the water.
Yep. Yeah, those are excellent questions. Hydroponics is a very cool area, so I'm glad that you're looking into it.
Thank you very much.
I had another quick question. So you talked about you did talk about like a day in the life at your job, but I was wondering, is it kind of cross-functional? Like, do you interact with different departments or departments that like we may not expect or something, if that makes sense?
Yeah, sustainability touches every single department. So I work with marketing and communications to create all the language around what we're going to put out. I work with legal to ensure that we're putting out like all of the information is good. I work with finance quite a bit because any information that we're putting out, we need to make sure is accurate. You know, if we need to audit, we need to have it to be auditable. So even working with those, which most people don't expect that, you know, you expect that you have to create an ROI system and a business plan, but you don't expect that you'd be working very closely with the CFO in order to create all of this information. And a lot of accountants, because you've got to get all of the accounting straight for creative solar projects. One thing, if you do get into these fields and you're doing a similar role, you'll find very quickly that financing for these sort of projects can be very creative in the best possible way, so you can get more done, more bang for your buck, and get more solar done. But it does require working a lot with accounting to make sure that everything is checked off, make sure everything is above board and everything like that. So, you know, you work with some areas that you expect, like energy, but then you also have some other ones that you probably wouldn't, like legal, marketing, or infrastructure.
Thank you.
Another question that I'm going to add to everything that everyone has said so far. I know you talked about having mentorship is like a really important part of like an internship that you find. Do you have any other career advice for people that are interested in sustainability and business simultaneously?
Yeah, I will say one of the hardest parts is getting started in this field. Unfortunately, the people who are hiring tend not to know what they're talking about. So a lot of the times you'll find that the very first person you talk to is, whenever you're applying for a role, is an HR representative who has no idea what ESG is, who is just kind of doing that initial screening. And so you kind of have to tailor your resume to be able to be something that can be read by somebody who has no idea what your resume actually says. And also you need to be able to tailor your questions to know whether or not somebody knows what you're talking about. So that's a big one. And then also something I found extremely early on is I am the expert in the room, you know, at every single thing I do. And that has been my entire career, is I am giving advice to the CEO. And that was not something I really expected 3 years out of college. And so you're expected to know and be the expert in the room from a very early stage in your career. And that's not something to shy away from. It's actually something that's pretty incredible. I know a lot of people who would love to be in this position of getting the exposure and experience that I am. So I'm very grateful for it, but it's also very intimidating. It can be very scary. So even if you're going into an entry-level role, it's an analyst role, a junior analyst role, and there is somebody above you who is full-time, you're going to be getting a lot of exposure. ESG is so new, and there are so few people who actually have the expertise to be doing it. So don't feel intimidated. Do your research. Make sure you have the answer ready to go. Never say something that you're not sure about. Always double check, do that research. Like I said, research is really paid off because I know how to Google things properly, quickly, and make sure that I'm getting it from an accurate source. And I can always have information to back it up if somebody ever questions me. So always have that ready to go. Really flex your research skills. That's really key.
Thank you. That's actually very helpful. And I find that, I guess, when you go into the workforce, you can't be completely fully prepared for everything you do, but kind of like having an idea and kind of, again, like being an expert in the room, like what you talked about, it's kind of like trusting yourself almost. That must be pretty difficult as a person starting out.
Well, at some point, I like to say you just kind of have to say, well, screw it. Either I'm right or I'm going to get fired, but either way, I'm going to do my best. And that's kind of what you just have to do, is you just kind of have to have this belief of like, well, I'm either going to change the world or I'm going to go down trying. And it sounds it's easy to say, but it's much harder to kind of have that faith of just being able to send that email, that very risky email that tells somebody they're wrong whenever you know you need to. Also, I will say, at some point in everybody's career, you're going to be thrown into something that you're not prepared for. With ESG, I think that happens much more frequently and much more early on in the career, just because it's so new. You know, all these reporting standards are literally changing, I swear, by the day, it seems like, and you're having to stay updated. You have to stay on top of it, but sometimes you don't stay on top of it. So you have to be able to say, I need some time, I need to do some research to confirm this. And that's okay, even whenever they're trying to give you, pressure you, and tell you you just got to figure it out. It's like, okay, I will. Give me 5 minutes. But that is something that you should expect to face fairly early on in this sort of area. You're going to be thrown into something that you're not necessarily prepared for, and that's okay. You just have to be able to figure out what the next step is. You don't need to figure out everything, just the next step. That's really key advice, is just figure out the next step, because you're going to be in this situation. I can pretty much guarantee it.
Hi, Sarah. My name is Tim. It was great to hear from you today. I was wondering if I could ask a quick question. Can you cover like any past involvement you have had in D&I and why you think other students should join D&I?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually, you know, I was telling the leaders whenever I first joined them on this call, my MSSM group actually was the first year to have D&I at DePaul. So originally it started off as just a couple of the MSSM graduate students. I wasn't one of the ones who started it, but I kind of attended the meetings, and it would probably be like 5 of us who were just hanging out at somebody's apartment, talking about sustainability, which is honestly what we did anyways. So I've been very glad to hear that the program has expanded. It's got more students. There's more events and things like that. And I think DePaul Net Impact, and also just Net Impact and Great, it's great for having on your resume, because a lot of people recognize it, especially if they're already in sustainability. It's a really good networking tool. So if you actually get an account and you go through that process, they have all kinds of jobs posted on there. You can do some of the challenges. I'd really encourage, if you have the time, get a team together and do one of those challenges, because that'll give you some of that sort of real world experience of going through how do you actually go through this? How do you actually create some of these plans and these projects that'll really help whenever you're in an interview and you're asked, how would you do this? How would you create this project? Or do you have any experience with food systems? Do you have any experience with energy efficiency? You could say, yes, I've got a whole project. I won an award for it. It's nationally recognized, and that looks really good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, you mentioned how you've noticed that net impact has been growing. Personally, I've just started doing like some of the social media for net impact. So I'm going to shamelessly plug in our Instagram, and we just started a LinkedIn. So we're trying to get that up and running, but you guys will see it in the chat. But I think Josh really wanted to ask a question too. Thank you.
Hi, Sarah. It was nice to hear from you tonight. Did you use any job resources while you were applying for jobs throughout your career, like job search resources?
Yeah, whenever I was graduating, DePaul was still extremely fresh at their getting students connected with ESG jobs. It was still incredibly new, so I would recommend checking up and seeing what those are like. I'm sure they've updated it. I know George has been working very closely with the MSSM program to get a lot more information. I found that by far the most useful resource has actually been your fellow classmates. So once I graduated and I started at Compass Group, I actually brought in 4 other fellow graduates from DePaul with me. Since then, some of my graduates have also brought in other DePaul graduates in. So that has been classmates. I was recommended by this job by another one of my classmates. Like, I hope you like your classmates. They are going to be one of your best resources for actually connecting and networking. Also connecting with programs like Green Biz. They have programs for students to go to their conferences and be completely sponsored by them. Highly recommend doing that. You can volunteer for conferences as well. LinkedIn actually is a really, really amazing resource, especially as a student, because I can pretty much guarantee you can go on there as a student and say, you can add almost anybody on LinkedIn. So if there's somebody who has a job that you want eventually one day, whether that is a chief sustainability officer or an analyst, add them on LinkedIn and start seeing what they're looking at, because LinkedIn actually has a lot of really, really good resources. I see jobs being posted on there every single time I check. Whenever I was more active, I would see jobs every single day for sustainability that weren't posted publicly. So really be very active on LinkedIn. It's kind of a little niche group, but once you get into it, once you get enough of those connections, you'll start seeing a lot of those jobs popping up.
Thank you.
So I'm double majoring in environmental studies and economics, and I was wondering if you remember any classes that you took that stood out particularly, or you feel really helped develop your career.
Ecological economics should definitely be at the top of your list with Dr. Klimas. That is for everybody, honestly. That's an exceptional class. And she does a very good job of teaching it and making the connection between the economy and the ecology, just hence the name. So that's definitely one of the best ones. I also really, out of the economics courses, labor economics and general economics with federal, like the Fed and things like that. I forget the name of that class, but looking at how the finance system in the US actually works, that was another exceptional class. And I use those all the time because almost any company you go to, the #1 cost will be people. So understanding what actually that looks like, how you can affect it, and what it will take, because a lot of these sustainability projects do take additional labor. So knowing how to figure out what that's going to cost and project out long term, are you going to need more people? That is a very valuable skill.
I've taken all those classes already, so glad to know I'm on the right path.
Right.
Thank you.
You're on the right path then.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any last questions? We might take one more and then we'll wrap it up.
All right. Well, thank
sorry.
you guys for coming.
Sorry,
yep.
Urja.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't have a
Go
question.
ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I don't have a question, but I would like to thank Sarah for enlightening us on this subject of sustainability, which I think taken as a very great importance these days. And until now, I wasn't aware, and I didn't know that it's holding such a huge importance in all the organizations. But thanks to you, my dear, and I'm sure I'm going to start taking more interest in this area and enhance my knowledge. Because until now, seriously, honestly speaking, I didn't know that it's going to have a huge impact. And you've been very inspiring. And as you rightly pointed out in the beginning of the conversation, that people didn't trust in that field, but you proved everybody wrong. So kudos to you for doing that. And thanks for the inspiration. And I don't have any question, obviously, but yeah, thanks for inspiring us and letting us, take more interest in this area because of the importance it's going to hold in the next few years, I'm sure, down the line. So thank you so much, Sarah, for enlightening us. Thank you so much.
I have one last question. So I've heard you mention about you being in Hungary. So was it a study abroad thing you did there?
Yeah, so I actually worked for a Hungarian member of parliament. So the way the EU Parliament works is they have different representatives from all the countries. So amazingly, somehow I didn't make it to Hungary the entire time, even though I was learning Hungarian from my coworkers. But I did get to go all over the rest of Europe, and I got to see some pretty amazing things during that study abroad. So I'd highly recommend it. I was able to study abroad twice. Please, if you get the chance, try and do it. It absolutely changes your life and your perspective on the world.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question. So would you recommend someone at DePaul to pursue the study abroad option? So I got the answer. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for participating in this discussion. And thank you so much, Sarah, for speaking with us. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I am sure everyone here has gotten so many insights and feels inspired to go through with a more sustainable future. And as far as if any of you guys want to contact Sarah, I'm going to put her LinkedIn and her email in the chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact her.
Yes, and
thank
again,
you all so much for meeting with us.
Well, I was just going to remind everybody, if you know somebody who's looking for a virtual internship, please send their resume to my email, and we'll try and get that started up, and we'll start posting that job soon, doing interviews. So if you know anybody, please feel free to send them my way.
Is it okay to ask what this internship is about, just to get a little bit of idea what is expected or what we will be doing?
Yeah, the internship is a general ESG internship. So be working under me, working on a lot of reporting, setting science-based targets, and more of the corporate reporting side and data analysis. Yeah, good question. Yeah, thank you all for having me. I really enjoyed your questions. I really enjoyed being here and virtually coming back and seeing what DePaul Net Impact is like in the modern day. So it's very exciting. I'm glad that it's still around, and I hope all of you stick with the club and please reach out if you have any more questions.
Yes, thank you so much. Everyone, her email is in the chat. Go check it out. Thank you again, Sarah. We really appreciated you coming on here. And thank you everybody else for asking questions and joining D&I today. We all appreciated it. So everyone have a great night. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.